first up and foremost, we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite word, but perhaps not in the way that you think. Slop. We've heard it, maybe we've used it, maybe we've been a victim of it. I picked a great article from Hillary Gridley for those of you that are familiar with her, and the title of the article is called "You Are Not in the Race Against Slop Cannons." So, good news, we have that to work through. I'd love to spend a few moments talking about how that actually impacts our product work and using Slop perhaps as a mirror for your own product craft. Instead of debating AI in the abstract, as many of us have seen and done here in the recent past, I'd like to see how it shows up and look at the uncomfortable places in our actual PM work, where we're unclear on goals, how we or could be interchangeable with the AI, and how we avoid hard calls, and how much we're sending signals around where we really care. We've put the article in the chat. I'm going to just I'm noticing for folks on the call, going to click and let folks in the room. So give me a moment as I walk through that for just a moment or two. Let's see. So we've got that in the chat. Let's go ahead and kick us off to our first cup, folks. Today we have three folks with us. First up, Jared builds products for a living and community on purpose and thinks those two things are more connected than most product orgs want to admit. Please welcome Jared Wasden, lead product manager at Theorem Medical.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Next up, we have Todd. Todd spent years running organizations before he started building products, and that sequence changes what you notice when building. Please welcome Todd Ward, product manager at Sync Systems. All right. And then last but not least, you guys may have seen him before. He's a Product Coffee regular. John works directly with executive leaders at the moments where the gap between strategy and reality is most expensive and most clarifying. Please welcome John Field, executive partner and founder at Valley Gate Partners.
Hey, everybody.
All right. So we're going to jump in, right? Slop Cannons. That's a fun name, but how does Slop show up in your work? I'd love to hear, Jared, if you've got a story around a recent example or feature or even experiment that shipped with fuzzy goals and perhaps how that fuzziness showed up in the way you communicated it.
Yeah, so I'm actually relatively new to my role at Furious, so I've inherited a lot of things I didn't make yet. And you slop in what I do as well. But one of the things that I did notice is that I inherited lots of specs that were very, very long. And they were clearly written with so much detail, but really to a degree that it was almost pointless for me and for the developers. They couldn't actually consume or hold that many things. You can pass 12,000 tokens to an LLM, but to a person, they need the real mission, vision, and purpose. And so I think what happens is when there's too much noise, it's really hard to know what are we actually trying to accomplish. And it just leaves so much ambiguity in the purpose of what we're trying to build, where we're trying to take it, and how we're going to get there. And so I've inherited a lot of things, and my goal pretty much is to try to slim it down to as little as possible. How do I really get back to what is essential? What are we trying to tackle?
Yeah, that's a good call out. Appreciate that, Jared. So fuzzy work, new work. How are we getting there together? Good call out. John, what do you think? Fuzzy work for you. What does that look like?
Yeah. So my favorite new word of the year, right? I don't know if everybody has a word of the year. My word of the year is specious.
Oh.
Does anybody on the call know what specious means? Nope. I'm seeing a lot of head moves. Okay. Specious is my favorite word for AI. It means plausible, but false, or plausible, but flawed. And that is one of the things that AI is fantastic at putting together. So as the head of Valley Gate, I'm actually fractional with a number of different companies. And so the temptation for me, from a slop cannon point of view, is to be able to say, let me write a couple of page prompt. Let me put everything in there in terms of here's where the business is, here's the user feedback that we've heard, here's the current customer feedback, here's some key screens and functionality. Help me come up with 3 different ideas where I can move forward and suggest them to the business that will drive these 3 outcomes. And so I can spend 30 minutes putting that prompt together, and then I can have 3 ideas that actually are fairly reasonable and have some legs under them. And it's not that that doesn't have its purpose, but what I find is that when I am doing that to try to get to the decision earliest, is when I cause problems later. And so one of the times that I did that, what I skipped was going out and actually talking to some of the users. For the people whose problems I was trying to solve, I took the sound bite as opposed to going out and having the conversation, asking the detailed questions, right? Just the good discovery practices that we're all used to. I tried to shortcut that and I made a mistake in doing it. And so what I would tell you is that as I think about, how I now reorient differently, it's much more along the lines of, can I get to where I am talking to more customers, frontline salespeople, all of those things faster and spending more time with that. And then I get to make the decision as opposed to trying to get AI to come up with a few different options that I'm just choosing the one of off the top of my head.
Yeah. Wow, that was and we learned a new word today, John. Thank you
And
so
you
much
learned
for
a new word. You didn't even have to have a word of the day calendar. You learned a new
that's
word.
fantastic. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I'm gonna jump over to Todd. Todd, tell us about something fuzzy that's happened in something you've recently done, experiment or building. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. The Specious is good. I'm gonna layer in another concept that I call the polish bias, right? Like if it looks good, it's got to be true. And like most of you are probably in the same situation that I was in when sent me this. Like I got it, and 15 minutes after I was asked to review a slide deck of our outcomes from quarterly planning that's getting ready to be sent out company wide. And I looked at that slide deck, obviously AI created, like, look, it is what it is, right? I'm sure everyone's doing that. And like my initial reaction was like, it looks great, but was it really great, right? It's to your point, John, it's plausible. Like all of those things were roughly around what we were talking about. But when you look at it critically, in this example, one of the things that my comment was, it's awesome, but it's not telling what we're not doing, right? It's telling what we are doing, and in many ways, what we're not doing, we're choosing not to do this quarter is often more important, right? And like that's not something that was brought into that context. So if you're just looking at it from a polished perspective, or does it sound like it covers the highlights? Yeah, it does that. But if you're looking at it from a strategy lens, like we also need to have that. We need to cover that too. Let's talk about what we're not doing. And it's and to me it is the polished bias. Like if it looks good, it's gotta be right. And it's hard to get people to on that journey with you and say, but you need to look at it a little bit closer. Just because it's got good sentence structure and someone didn't slop it together doesn't mean that it isn't slop. It's pretending as real, right? When it may not be.
Yeah, that is that is a good and how timely article, deck, challenge accepted right there in the moment. So I think you each have really touched on something that, we have no option at this point. It's going to be there. It's going to likely be just I said last week, just assume you're always being recorded. There's no transcription, sometimes multiple. So I'd love to hear if there's a specific tool or place or product that you're exploring today to help find I just lost my line on this, so sorry about that. Let's look here. Yeah, so what's one product you're studying right now and not just using to actively sharpen your product sense? And so, right, if we're always going to be recording, that deck is always going to be generated. We know, right, our human critical thinking skills are needed there, but what are you using to kind of help support that or build that from your experience? And so I'll pivot over. I won't give Jared the hot seat there. I'm going to go back. Todd, are you willing to take the challenge and take the mic back?
Yeah, I like one of the things that I think gives us, or one way that I'm using AI is for every product brief or every plan that we have. The good part is being able to give it a bunch of context and then not anchor it back to what you're really trying to do, right? And that's why I think when you start talking about goals and key results and things that you're doing, that your true OKRs for the quarter and what the product vision is, I've started running everything through like a diagnostic against those things. Like it doesn't really matter what it is. If I'm doing a brief, like let's as a part of that process, hit our product intelligence thing and it talks about our vision and where we want to be and our company goals, and give me back a level of comparison. I'm not using it other than to see whether or not I'm hitting the mark, things that I may not have seen from the initial pass. And that's just using Claude, right? Like that's your normal tools. I think that the other thing, which is kind of related to that, is whenever I'm prototyping, I'm using this. Well, what we know as product people is like the first solution is like you fall in love with it too soon, right? And from that perspective, is using this model of like the creator, the critic, and the reviser, the critic back again, and then the final draft, right? Give Claude the instructions to use that adversarial relationship to say, yes, this is the idea, and now critique it. Now and the critique should be written back by the agent, and then you take and you keep going at it and give it a couple iterations so that you can have the AI do a good basis, and then of course run that against your objectives and make it do 3 solutions to the same problem. That way you're not actually falling in love with the first. But those are a couple different ways that I found it's improving my quality and anchoring me back to what I think is the objective.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for that, Todd. And you pulled on a couple threads. I purposely didn't go to John first because I knew he had a good answer for this. And while you were
Okay.
talking, I knew for a fact that this was going to be a piece that John was going to have a lot to speak about. And I saw him speak at Product Camp Atlanta last fall and thinking about your full prompt. So I'm happy to hear you maybe share some notes or even some learnings from that, John, because I bet your thinking's evolved a bit as well. So tell us about your product sets and how you're challenging that with AI tooling.
Yeah, for sure. Like we could literally spend the rest of the time camped out here. Yep. So the 2 things that I kind of go to is that, and if you want to see my product talk, you can go to validatepartners.com, and I've got posted there. It's about how to think differently in the age of AI. But with that, I do have a structured input. So when I think about your question, right? I think about working with AI like a pilot works, where it's like the pilot takes care of the takeoff, autopilot can take care of the flight, and then the pilot takes care of the landing. So I am very focused on making sure that I have a good manual takeoff. So that's the inputs that are going in to AI. And as Allison shared, I have a very structured way that I'm doing those inputs, and then I let AI do its thing. And then I'm going to be reviewing what comes out of there to make sure that on both sides of it, it's still my credibility that's on the line. So in terms of how do I do that, especially when when I'm working just on my own, I fought this for a long time, but I have moved to Cursor, GitHub, and Claude are sort of my 3 primary tools. I used to be an engineering manager. I was like, I don't want to be on GitHub. I don't want to use Cursor. They're too technical. Those are engineering tools. And it's like, no, you know what? I think I've got to get to where I have got that version history and what have you. So when I'm collaborating with somebody on AI, and to kind of build off of Todd's example, I want to see, send me your inputs, send me your back and forth with the chatbot, and send me your output, because then it's so much easier for me to see where the flaws might be. And so Claude can actually really help you with this, where it's like, if you're working in like Cowork or Claude Code, you can have it put, a decision log together and the inputs and what have you. So even as you're going back and forth and prompting, you can have it writing to a markdown file that is separate from just copying and pasting the browser window. And so then, or the Cowork window or whatever. And so again, then I can see, oh, this is what they loaded in. They didn't mention this. They didn't mention that. They didn't mention that. So then I understand that's why the deck, it looks great, but here's some of the things they left off.
Yeah, very good. And right, you're the pilot. So, right, we're not running on autopilot. That's the important piece of that. But I think we've all probably learned it less as well. Last week, I jumped on the stage with Jared, and he was talking about how he thinks about AI and certainly uses it as a bit of a challenge partner. And Jared, I'm wondering if the conversation here is recalling some of that, or if there's something else that's you'd like to pull a thread on around your
Yeah, I did both.
thinking.
So I actually use a pretty similar stack to what John uses, but one of the things that I do, and this is the talk that I gave, was about a famous woman, Harrington. Right. Yep. Hard to forget that name. And she knew that she was going to be critiqued as the first woman who presented to the Royal Academy, and like 1908, something like that. And so she knew she had to back up her assertions with data. And so I use Claude in a very similar way, where when it does come up with some assertions, or I present an assertion, I'm thinking this, I have my own product sense and I bring it to bear, and I want it to critique them, but I don't want it to either just tell me my ideas are great or tear me down. What I wanted to do is help me tease out where the flaws are in my assumptions. And one of my favorite things, to go back to what Todd was saying, is when it comes back with a critique, I love to ask it to critique its critique. You critique yourself. And what you'll find is that it says, it has some hard critique. And then it'll say, well, actually, I kind of overstated myself here and here and here. And then I'll say, well, let's do it again. And we do it again. And we do it again. And it's kind of like when you boil something down and you get to the essence of it. And at the end of the day, it might still be wrong. I think John's work with Specious is a great use here, because I think you still have to step back and go, okay, well, is it critique of its critique correct? And you can get way down the rabbit hole. But I do find it useful in helping me to check my own assumptions and pressure test things before I build on them. I mean, if you've ever done something where Claude comes back with a prompt or a plan and you say, yep, do it. And it comes back with something else and you say, yep, do it. And then 4 hours later, you've built something that is just like a house of cards. And you go, yeah, okay, that's not really what I wanted, because you just let it build on really shaky assumptions. And I think that's one risk we have. So I do try to use it to challenge itself. As the son of 2 air traffic controllers, I do think about pilots a lot. But for me, the image that resonates with me the most is more like a conductor of an orchestra. Because now I have all these different tools, and I have agentic stuff, and I've got one specifically intended for design and another one intended for code. And I'm trying to figure out, how do I get them to do their particular parts, but we come out with some sort of holistic experience, holistic code or a plan. And you can have brilliant musicians, but if the conductor doesn't know what you're trying to accomplish, it can still come out as cacophony and just be a bunch of noise. And so I think that it really does take some attention to create something cohesive. And I think that's what this article that we're talking about nailed really well, is the sense of taste. And I think we've all heard a lot of people talk about it. But what's the difference between something that's really cliche or something that's really elegant? They're both design patterns. But what is the distinction? What's the difference that makes us go, ooh, yeah, no, I recognize it, but that looks really nice, versus, ooh, I recognize it, that looks like garbage. And how do we
Polish
build
bias.
things? Yeah, how do we build things that are going towards that sense of elegance and quality? And yeah, we're going to live in a world where AI is going to be a part of it. I don't think you can put that back in Pandora's box. But how do you make sure that the human element is coming through loud and clear? And that's something I try to do when I approach AI.
Yeah. Awesome.
I love what you said there right at the end, especially about coaching AI. I tend to find that, kind of getting back to Allison's question as well, is that the more that I treat AI like a junior to mid-level employee, the better the results are that come out of it, right? It's the, okay, how did you come up with that? What are you thinking about? Have you thought about this? What about that? Like the same way that if somebody had 5 years of experience and they were coming in my office with the deck, I wouldn't just go, that looks great, I'm going to go present this to the board, right? I would poke at it. I would spar at it a little bit. And so a lot of the qualities that you build up when you're leading others and you have a team with varied levels of experience, I find that translate really directly to helping ensure that you're not just getting some of that slop.
Do you find, John, that, I mean, the raw quantity that it can produce for you, and the whole joke of like TLDR and now it's AIDR, it gives you this massive prompt, and you're like, so you skim it like you skim articles. And the problem is it takes those things very literally. And do you find that, like, how much time are you spending actually critiquing the AI versus actually producing value for the organization?
So that's a great question. And it's especially a great question in collaboration, right? Because that's where you started as well, where it's like, I came in and these requirements documents are crazy long. And so one of my huge red flags of we're going to stop using AI and talk to each other is that if I feel like I need to use AI to analyze the document that you sent to me, it probably means that my AI is talking to your AI and we need to cut out the middlemen for a period of time, actual conversation, because that's where things have probably, again, we're all producing these amazing looking documents, but if it's both of our AIs that are talking, things have gone off the rails.
Yeah. Todd, what do you think?
I 100% agree. Like, it is funny. Like, I feel like sometimes I'm creating things for other AI, right? Like, it's like, what am I creating for another AI? Like, I love and hate meeting notes, right? Like, I like it. It's one of those things I like not being able to feel like where I can feel present in the meeting instead of having to take notes, right? I love that piece of it. But I also hate that it's like, yeah, I know that the quality of the notes doesn't fully capture what happened. And so then you start to question whether or not, whether I should be taking notes, and it depends on which service you're using, obviously. But yeah, and then people will post the summary, and I'm like, yeah, but that really doesn't capture what fully happened in the meeting. If everyone's relying on that, if they're feeding it into other contexts, the degradation happens across inputs, right? As you're using outputs and inputs across the spectrum to make decisions, right? When they lead to other decisions, that's where I think we get into problems too. So
April made a great comment in the chat as well, where you've got to make sure that things are cited, right? And that you're understanding where AI is coming from when it's making those conclusions. And as well, you could even do a good job on the inputs of giving it the context and the constraints that say, here's where I want you to draw from, here's where you can't draw from, right? So especially if you're using something where you've got customer feedback data on a spreadsheet on your computer, being able to say, like, literally, you have to stay constrained to this, or do you want it to pull in Reddit? Do you want it to do whatever? And then you could also say things like, if you have any questions, don't make any assumptions, ask me about them. And, that way you're also ensuring that you're not ending up with a polluted rag that you are trying to then base decisions on that have been absolutely hallucinated.
Yeah. We could probably go long on this topic. I was trying to find a brief one, and I'm so glad that the conversation has gone this direction, because I think it is about finding that human integration piece. Don't dismiss your own product thinking and critical thinking skills, right? Those are still needed. In fact, they're perhaps important than ever. And again, with the heavy hits on the quotes today, but context management for sure is something that I think is probably keeping us all in close consideration on how do we write the right information to be looking at at the right time in our process. So we are close up on time, so I'm gonna pull us in and say thank you so much, Jared, John, and Todd, for joining us. Please feel free to hang out and enjoy the rest of the session, but we really appreciated the conversation this morning.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we usually have a few minutes. We're not going to today for introductions, so I apologize if you're here and ready. But if you do have something you want to share in the chat, I'd love to hear your feedback about our first cup session. Also, right, we're here for you. This is a conversation. Today, we didn't get a whole lot of that this morning in the first cup, but I suspect the second part we will. So really glad to have you all joining us today. So we are here. There are humans. Work is hard. Got some of the best and brightest humans here with me today. I am honored to talk about this topic, and it's a full, hard topic to navigate. So I'm just going to ask that everybody, you are not alone in this, and we want to have conversation. So we're going to tell some stories and talk through some things. If you've got an idea or want to resonate with that, we'd love to see you in the chat. Come off of mute, raise your hand, things of that nature. The real cost of the human cost of real product work is a conversation about the personal side of the invisible load, the mental burden, the emotional wear and tear, and the career trade-offs that build up slowly until they're impossible to ignore. We're not going to stop naming the problem, and we'll dig into what experienced product folks learn to change, what they've stopped absorbing, and how to build a product career that is both meaningful and sustainable over time. On stage with me today are three great folks that I look to as a point of reference, and it's an honor to be sharing the stage with you today. First up, the work most product leaders find unglamorous is exactly where you'll find Lulu. She chooses to live and build a career in enterprise B2B SaaS across large companies like Cisco and ServiceNow, and mid-sized startups operating at the intersection of product and operations and building connective tissue between strategy and execution that nobody officially owns, but everything depends on. Her philosophy is that removing the toil doesn't just free up time, it removes the mental ceiling. And when she's not counting what doesn't get counted, you'll find her doing something creative, whether it be ceramics, prints, needlework, anything that catches her creative eye. Please welcome Lulu Bai, a lead product manager. All right. Next up, 3 career pivots. You've topped me. 10 years in the Army and a path through engineering and operations before landing a product means Niku has carried more invisible load across more contacts than most PMs in a lifetime, and certainly more than me. I'm amazed by your work, sir. And he's refreshingly honest about what it costs. He now builds AI platforms and data products that power marketing and sales pipelines, leads a Vets in Tech Seattle organization and chapter connecting veterans to the tech industry. And when he's not shipping or logging miles, you'll find him in the trenches raising his 2 kids and a surplus of dad jokes. We're welcome and honored to have you with us today, Niku. Thank you. Niku Parente, Senior Product Manager. And last but not least, still surprising me today with dropping the facts, but excited to have Peyton with us today. The personal cost of shipping something extraordinary is something she knows firsthand, having just helped launch the Disney Adventure cruise ship in Singapore while navigating being a new parent, and trusting international travel and a 30-hour solo flight with 2 children under 3. That is hard for her husband while she could finish and stay on with her work on the job. She builds digital guest experiences in an environment that is equal parts theme park, hotel, and moving ship, as she joked earlier. And when she's finally back on dry land, you'll catch her and her family in their Airstream exploring the country. Welcome, Peyton Lynch, Lead Product Manager.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. So we're going to jump in with story time, but Peyton, how about share us a story of invisible personal cost and tell us about what you did with that?
Absolutely. So, Allison, I was so glad when you started with, we're going to be naming the problem today, because that is where my story starts. And I will be talking a bit about the Disney Adventure. It's near and dear to my heart, and what it's like navigating my career. Am I still postpartum at a year postpartum? I don't know. I guess you're always a postpartum after you have kids, but navigating this with a 1 and 3-year-old little girls. But I rejoined Disney Cruise Line about 2 years ago. I boomeranged between our parks operation and cruise line, and was newly pregnant with my now 1-year-old at the time. And my story begins like many of yours probably do. The business came to me and said, "Hey, welcome. So glad you're joining the product team. We have a tool that we want you to build regarding the onboard experiences for our newest ship, instead of starting with what problem we're trying to solve." So raise your hand if you've ever experienced this. They're just telling me how they want to solve it. I see nodding heads. Yes, very familiar. And so while I was new in the space, I had to do a lot of that upfront work of establishing trust, spending time in one-on-ones, shadowing folks, messages in Teams thread, hallway conversations, getting people to come along this journey of understanding the problem, identifying the problem, and then evaluating if the tool that they felt was best, if it really was best. And what we found is that it wasn't. We landed on a different solution once we were able to identify that problem. And so really, in many ways, spent a lot of time getting a yes and buy-in before any formal meeting ever happened in a room. So by the time we got to the meeting, it was great.